They said there were women who carried more power in silence than men carried in armies. Women whose compassion bent lords and kings. Women who risked everything, not for glory but for mercy. This was Lady Godiva. For centuries people told of her ride, how she pleaded for her people's freedom, how she passed through the streets of Coventry, veiled only by her hair, and how her courage became legend, carried in paintings, poems and songs. Some believed she was England's first protester. Others thought her tale was myth, shaped from older gods and older rites. But no one doubted the power of her story, a story that outlived kingdoms. What we know for certain is that Lady Godiva became a symbol, not of battles or swords, but of mercy turned into defiance. A reminder that compassion once shown can echo for 1,000 years. Before we begin, if you truly enjoy these stories, hitting like and subscribe helps me keep making them, and hopefully helps you keep drifting off. Let me know when and where you're listening from tonight. I'm always amazed by the places people tune in. Now, get comfortable, take a slow breath in, and then let it out, because once this story begins, chances are you'll be asleep before it ends. The year is close to the turn of the first millennium. England is still a patchwork of small kingdoms bound by oaths, rivalries, and fragile peace. In the heart of Mercia, the land lies rich and green. Dark soil nurtures fields of barley and wheat. Rivers glimmer like polished silver, winding past forests alive with deer and fox. It is here, in this land of both hardship and plenty, that a noble child is born. Her name in Old English is Godgifu, meaning God's gift. Later centuries will know her by another name, Lady Godiva. The world she enters is not soft. It is a world where the harvest may wither in one cruel season, where Viking raids still haunt the coasts, where power is secured not only with prayer but with the sword. Yet in the timbered halls of Mercia, wrapped in linen, this child carries the quiet promise of a future story. The air of the 11th century is filled with change. England is shifting under the weight of new rulers, new alliances, new fears. Monasteries rise like islands of stone across the countryside, where monks copy manuscripts by candlelight. Villages huddle close to rivers, their thatched roofs bent against the wind, and in noble halls the fates of families are bound by arranged marriages and whispered agreements. Godiva grows in such a hall. Timber beams overhead, rushes strewn on the floors scented with herbs to soften the smell of smoke, servants carrying trenchers of bread and meat, priests chanting prayers in the small chapel attached to the estate, horses stamping in the stables ready to carry messages across Mercia's fields. From her earliest years she would have been aware of duty. A noble child was not simply herself, she was the vessel of her family's honour, the bearer of alliances, the promise of heirs. But she was also a girl with eyes and thoughts of her own. We cannot hear them directly across the silence of centuries, yet in the choices she will later make her voice still echoes. England in her youth is a land shadowed by fear of raids. Viking ships no longer arrive as often as they once did, yet the memory of dragon-prowed vessels is fresh in every coastal town. Farmers pray over their fields, asking for both rain and protection. Merchants risk the roads to sell their wares in markets, carrying news as much as goods. And always, above these ordinary lives, the lords and ladies of the land must decide how to govern. Godiva's family holds land, wealth and power. She learns early of responsibility. She sees her mother at the loom, not only weaving cloth but weaving alliances through gifts. She sees her father speak with priests, promising endowments to ensure the salvation of the soul. She watches riders arrive at the hall, cloaks wet with rain, bringing news of battles and councils. She's taught prayers. She's taught the keeping of accounts, the valuing of land, the duty to the poor. Charity is not only a virtue but a means of showing authority. In giving alms, a noblewoman shows her piety, and piety strengthens her husband's rule. But for Godiva, the act of giving will take on a deeper form. The chronicles tell us little of her girlhood. Her name appears only when she's grown, a woman beside her husband, Leofric of Mercia. But silence itself speaks. For a woman to be remembered at all in the chronicles of that age is rare. That her memory not only survived but grew into legend suggests an extraordinary presence. Imagine her walking through the estate gardens as a young woman, the air thick with the scent of herbs, sage, thyme, rosemary. A hawk cries above the fields, children play at the edges of the village. She pauses to give a coin to a beggar, to speak kindly to a woman bent with work. These are small moments, yet they shape the memory of her as one who cared for the poor. Marriage binds her to Leofric, Earl of Mercia. He is a man of strength and command, a lord whose voice carries weight in councils of war. Through him, Godiva's life expands, stretching across the Midlands, touching the politics of the entire kingdom. But though her husband's name appears in charters and chronicles, it is her own that will live most vividly in myth. The ride for which she will be remembered is far in the future, yet already the pieces of the story are forming. A woman of noble birth, a deep concern for the people of her land, a willingness to challenge power even within her own household. These threads lie quiet now, but they are ready to be woven into legend. In the evenings, candles gutter in the halls of Coventry. Monks chant in their cloisters, voices rising and falling like waves. Merchants settle in taverns to drink ale and whisper of taxes, and within her chamber, Lady Godiva kneels at prayer, beads slipping one by one through her fingers. Already she is a figure of devotion, of quiet strength, of compassion. The night settles over Mercia. The forests fall still. Only the hoot of an owl and the crackle of fire on the hearth disturb the silence, and in that silence the story of Lady Godiva waits, not yet told, but waiting to begin. By the time Godiva is a young woman, the name of Leofric of Mercia carries weight across England. He is no minor lord, but an earl of vast influence, a man whose counsel kings respect. Through marriage to him, Godiva steps fully into the stage of power. Leofric is remembered in chronicles as strong and sometimes stern. He commands armies, he manages lands, he deals with kings of Wessex and Northumbria, weighing alliances like a man weighing gold. Godiva, beside him, is not silent. Her presence is noted. Her name appears in charters, confirming gifts of land to monasteries. This is unusual for a woman, and it shows her independence. Together they become one of the most powerful couples in England. Their seat in Coventry grows from a modest town into a centre of religious devotion. They are credited with founding a monastery, the beginnings of what would one day rise into Coventry Cathedral. For a noble couple, this is not only an act of piety but also of politics. Religious houses strengthen authority. They secure prayers for the souls of their patrons. They show generosity to the poor while reminding everyone of who holds power. Godiva's influence is clear. She's not a shadow to Leofric, but a partner. Her devotion to faith, her gifts to the church, her charitable presence, all are remembered in records. When her name appears beside her husband's in deeds, it suggests her authority is recognised. Not all noblewomen received such mention. For her it is a sign of standing as much in her own right as through her marriage. Life in their hall is filled with both ceremony and daily rhythm. At dawn, priests chant the first prayers of the day. Servants bustle in the kitchens, baking bread, preparing meat. Children of the village run across the yard, carrying water or tending animals. Leofric hears reports from his reeves and stewards. Godiva oversees the distribution of alms, ensuring the poor at the gate receive food. Each day is a blend of piety, duty and governance. And yet, beyond these walls, England is unsettled. Kings change, battles erupt, alliances shift. The shadow of Danish power still lingers, even as England bends toward the rule of Edward the Confessor. Every decision Leofric and Godiva make carries weight not just for Coventry, but for the balance of power across the land. Godiva walks often through the market streets of Coventry. Merchants bow as she passes, women bless her name, children watch with wide eyes. She is remembered for compassion, not merely the distant compassion of coin, but the tangible presence of a noblewoman who sees the lives of her people. It is this memory that will fuel the later legend. The tale of the ride makes sense because the seed of care was always there. Marriage in the 11th century is not always gentle. It is often a contract of land, heirs and alliances. But between Godiva and Leofric there seems to have been respect. Though stern, Leofric does not eclipse her in records. He allows, even honours, her place in their shared legacy. That she later dares to challenge him, and that her challenge is remembered, speaks of a bond strong enough to bear it. Imagine a feast in their hall. Long tables laid with bread, cheese, roasted meats, candles burning in iron sconces, jugglers or musicians offering entertainment between courses. Leofric seated at the high table, commanding attention with his voice. Godiva beside him, dressed in fine wool, her hair bound in braids, her presence a mixture of grace and authority. Such moments display power not only to guests, but to all who serve. When she gives in ways that endure. She donates lands to monasteries, ensuring prayers are said for generations. She secures the building of churches. She establishes Coventry as a place of devotion and learning. In a time when few women leave marks on history, she leaves one written in stone. It is worth remembering that she lived through extraordinary change. The year 1066 would bring the Norman conquest, reshaping England entirely. Though she dies soon after that date, she belongs to the last great generation of Anglo-Saxon nobility. Her life is the bridge between one world and the next. And yet, when people speak her name today, they do not recall only her land, her deeds, or her piety. They recall the ride, the story that will come later, of her unclothed form moving silently through the streets of Coventry, hair cascading like a cloak. That tale overshadows all else. But here, in her years as Lady of Mercia, we glimpse the roots. We see the woman who cared for her people. We see the woman whose compassion will spark a legend. Night falls again on Coventry. The bells of the monastery toll softly across the fields. Leofric sits in his chamber, drafting charters. Godiva kneels in prayer, her rosary beads slipping through her fingers. Outside, the town settles into sleep, unaware that their lives will one day be bound to the memory of their lady in ways no one yet imagines. Life in Coventry does not move at the pace of nobles and their charters. For the townspeople, life is measured by the toll of church bells, the rhythm of markets, the changing of seasons. Theirs is a world of work, of survival, of enduring burdens placed upon them by those who rule. Taxes are among those burdens. Each household must give what it can to the Lord's coffers. Sometimes it's coin, more often it is grain, wool, or livestock. A portion of what is harvested, spun, or bred is claimed in the name of governance. For the people of Coventry, such demands can feel endless. On feast days, the town bursts with colour. Merchants lay out wares of cloth and pottery. Children laugh as jugglers toss apples in the air. Priests chant blessings, incense curling in the sunlight. But beneath the joy is a quiet worry. Too much is taken, too little is left. The poor suffer first, the sick and the widowed suffer most. Godiva sees this burden clearly. She does not pass through the market with her eyes turned away. She notices the mother selling her last hen to pay dues. She notices the old man with calloused hands, offering grain that should have fed his family. She hears the muttered complaints, the whispered prayers for mercy, and though she is a countess wrapped in noble robes, she feels the weight of their suffering. Leofric, her husband, views the matter differently. For him, taxes are the lifeblood of authority. They pay soldiers, they maintain roads, they ensure the defence of Mercia. If the people grumble, it is the natural order of things. Without taxation, he argues, there would be no stability at all. At night in their hall, Godiva speaks of what she has seen. The people are weary, she tells him. They can bear no more, but Leofric shakes his head. He insists that rule requires sacrifice. He reminds her that mercy can invite weakness, yet still she presses. Her compassion does not allow her silence. The couple's debates are remembered dimly through legend. Some say she pleaded again and again for relief. Others say she spoke only once, but with such passion that her words burned into memory. Whatever the truth, her plea for the people became part of her very identity. Coventry itself grows restless. Travellers carry news from other towns where lords have lightened burdens, where kings have shown favour. Why not here, they ask. Why must Coventry groan under weight heavier than others? The whispers gather strength. A town can endure hunger, but it cannot endure despair without voices rising. And so, in the midst of this tension, the legend places its spark. Leofric, tired of his wife's appeals, offers a challenge so outrageous that he believes she will never dare attempt it. If she truly wants him to lift the taxes, he declares, she must ride through the streets unclothed, not robed in silk, not veiled in dignity, but bare as no noblewoman would ever be seen. The demand is cruel. It is a test meant to silence her. For in a world where a woman's honour is bound to her modesty, the idea is unthinkable. To be seen unclothed would be shame worse than death for many. Leofric assumes the matter will end there. His wife surely will not accept. But Godiva does not respond with silence. Whether in legend or in history, her courage lies in answering when others expect retreat. She weighs the suffering of the people against her own shame, and slowly a decision forms within her. The people of Coventry know nothing of this debate. They rise at dawn, tend their fields, mend their tools, carry goods to market. They speak of taxes, but they cannot imagine that their lady is fighting for them in her own chamber. They cannot imagine that she considers paying the highest price a noblewoman might pay, her dignity, for their relief. Godiva prays long in her chapel. Candles flicker before images of the saints. Her rosary beads slip through her hands. She asks for strength. She asks for guidance. She asks that if she acts, her act will not be in vain. Her faith does not erase fear, but it shapes it into resolve. Outside, the seasons continue their slow turning. Harvest brings its brief bounty. Winter brings hunger again. And always the taxes press down. The people do not yet know that their lady is preparing to take upon herself an act that will echo for centuries. In the hush of her chamber, she speaks once more to Leofric. If this is truly the price, she says, then she will pay it. Her husband is startled. Perhaps he laughs at first, thinking she cannot mean it. Perhaps he grows stern, realizing she might. But in either case, the bargain is set. The ride will come. This is the heart of the legend. A woman of noble birth, choosing shame to lift the burden from her people. A lady willing to make herself vulnerable, to face the gaze of a whole town for the sake of justice. Whether the ride truly happened, or whether it grew in the telling, the story has lived because it speaks to a deeper truth. The truth that compassion sometimes requires defiance, and so Coventry waits, though it does not know what it waits for. The bells toll as always, merchants shout in the market, children chase geese across the muddy streets, and in the hall of Leofric and Godiva, a decision has been made that will transform both history and myth. The chamber is quiet, though the weight of unspoken words hangs between them. Leofric sits at a heavy oak table, parchment and wax before him, the tools of rule. Godiva stands nearby, her hands clasped, her gaze steady. She has spoken before on behalf of the people, but tonight her voice carries a new depth. "My lords," she begins, "they cannot endure this any longer." Her tone is calm, yet every syllable is edged with urgency. The markets are emptying. The barns are bare. The poor sell what little remains to meet demands that grow heavier with each season. She does not raise her voice, but the truth in her words is sharper than a blade. Leofric does not look up at once. He seals a document, presses his ring into the wax, and only then meets her gaze. "You speak as though I do not know hardship," he answers. "Taxes pay for defence, for soldiers, for the strength of Mercia. Without them, there is nothing." His words are iron, but iron can be bent with time and pressure. Godiva steps closer. "You have seen me walk among them. You know I speak not from fancy, but from witness. Children grow thin. Widows sit hungry in doorways. Men give their last sheep, their last ox, until they have nothing left. Will you keep bleeding them until nothing remains?" Her voice does not tremble. She speaks as one who carries both compassion and resolve. Leofric rises, his cloak brushing the floor. He is a man used to command, used to obedience. He has faced kings and warlords without faltering, but here stands his wife, unarmed, yet unyielding. It is not an enemy across the battlefield, but a partner across the hearth. "You are too soft," he tells her. "Rule requires hardness. Mercy breeds weakness, and weakness invites ruin. Do you think our enemies care if the people of Coventry grow weary? Number, they would seize on weakness, they would press into our borders. Better the people grow now than perish later." Godiva shakes her head. "Strength without mercy is not strength, it is tyranny. And what is a lord if not the protector of his people? What good is it to defend Mercia if Mercia's heart withers within its towns?" Her eyes burn not with anger, but with a steady fire of faith and compassion. Leofric turns away pacing. He is torn between pride and reason, between duty as he sees it, and the truth she presses upon him. At last, in a tone half weary and half mocking, he makes his challenge. "Very well, wife. If you wish me to lift this burden, then prove your resolve. Ride through Coventry unclothed. Let the people see how deep your compassion runs. Do this, and I will grant your request." The words are meant as a wall, not a door. They are meant to silence her, to end the argument in absurdity. What noblewoman would dare such a thing? What woman, bound by honour, by modesty, by all the expectations of her station, would endure such shame? Leofric believes she will falter, but he does not yet know the strength of her heart. The chamber falls silent. The fire crackles. Outside, the wind rattles shutters. Godiva does not flinch. She holds his gaze, and though her cheeks grow pale, her voice is steady. "If that is the price, then I will pay it." Leofric blinks, startled. "Do not jest with me, wife." "I do not jest," she replies. "For the people I would bear their burden. If shame is what you ask, then I will carry it. I will ride, and you will see that my plea is not weakness, but strength." For the first time, the challenge turns back upon him. He, the earl, the warrior, the ruler, is confronted not by rebellion, but by devotion so deep it unsettles him. What began as mockery now hangs as a vow. He has spoken, and she has accepted. The words cannot be undone. That night Godiva prays long in the chapel. Candles flicker around her, pools of light against the darkness. The scent of incense lingers in the air. Her beads move through her fingers as she whispers each prayer. She asks for courage, for guidance, for the strength to endure what lies ahead. In her heart she feels the weight of fear. To ride unclothed is to strip away not only garments but the very shield of dignity. And yet her compassion outweighs her fear. She thinks of the hungry children, the bent backs of labourers, the empty stalls in the market. For them, she whispers, she will do this. Word spreads slowly through the hall. Servants catch fragments of the argument, whispers of what has been promised. They shake their heads in disbelief. Surely their lady will not attempt it. Surely the earl's words were only in jest. But whispers have a way of seeping into walls, and walls have a way of remembering. The people of Coventry know nothing yet. They go on with their lives, unaware that their fate now hinges on the courage of their lady. The baker kneads his dough. The smith hammers at his anvil. The shepherd drives his flock through muddy fields. But above them all, a choice has been made, a vow spoken, a legend waiting to be born. Days pass. Godiva moves with her usual grace, overseeing alms, greeting priests, walking through the market. Yet within her, every step carries the knowledge of what she must soon do. The town she loves will see her at her most vulnerable, and yet she does not waver. Her resolve is steel wrapped in silk. Leofric watches her carefully. Perhaps he waits for her to retreat, to beg release from the vow. Perhaps he hopes the matter will fade, forgotten in the press of daily governance. But Godiva does not retreat. The more he waits, the more her silence speaks. She will ride. At last the day must be set, a morning when the streets of Coventry will fall still, a moment when shutters will close, prayers will rise, and the hoofbeats of a single horse will echo through history. It is not yet that day, but the promise of it grows nearer. And in the quiet of anticipation, the plea of Lady Godiva has become more than words. It has become a vow carved into the heart of legend. The morning comes quietly, as though the world itself holds its breath. Mist drifts low across the fields around Coventry. The air is cool, heavy with dew. In the streets, shutters are drawn, doors bolted, voices hushed. Word has spread, carried like smoke on the wind, that their lady will do what no one thought possible. The townspeople honour her request. One by one they close their windows, refusing themselves the sight. It is an act of loyalty as much as of reverence. If their lady is to bear shame, they will not deepen it. They will guard her with silence. And so the streets fall still. Merchants hide their wares. Children are pulled inside by anxious mothers. Even the dogs seem to sense something different in the air. Only the creak of wood, the whisper of the wind, and the distant toll of a bell disturb the silence. Within her chamber Godiva prepares. Her gown is set aside, her veil is removed. Her hair, long and rich, is loosened until it falls in waves about her shoulders, cascading down her back like a cloak spun of gold and chestnut. Her prayers are quiet, but her resolve is loud in her heart. A servant leads forth the horse. Its coat is dark, its eyes calm. It has carried her before on hunts and processions, but today its burden is unlike any other. She strokes its neck, steadying it as much as herself. The saddle waits, the reins hang loose. Slowly she mounts. For a moment she closes her eyes, the weight of the moment pressing upon her. Then she opens them again, lifts her chin, and guides the horse forward. The hooves strike the stones with a sound that seems to echo across centuries. The streets of Coventry stretch before her, empty, shuttered, silent. The people are present in spirit, though unseen. She feels their eyes not upon her body but upon her courage, their prayers wrapping her more tightly than any garment could. And so she rides. Step by step the horse carries her through the town. Her hair veils her form, falling across her shoulders, brushing against her arms. The sound of hooves is slow, measured, solemn. Each strike against the stone is like the toll of a bell announcing her vow. Legend tells of one man who disobeys, a tailor named Tom who cannot resist the temptation to look. He peers through a crack in his shutters, and in that instant he is struck blind. From him comes the phrase "Peeping Tom," a warning across ages that dishonour brings its own punishment. But beyond that single tale, the people remain true. No windows open, no voices call. The silence is not emptiness, but reverence. It is the silence of a people protecting their lady as she protects them. Godiva keeps her gaze forward. She does not falter, does not shrink. Each step of the horse is a prayer answered, a burden lifted. Her body is bare, but her spirit is clothed in courage. And in that courage, shame has no power. The ride is not long. Coventry is not a vast city, but a town of markets and homes clustered around its church and monastery. Yet each street feels endless, each moment stretched by the weight of silence. Time itself seems to slow, as though it knows it is witnessing a legend being born. At last she circles back toward the hall. The horse's hooves echo one final time across the stones. She draws the reins, brings it to a halt, and bows her head. The ride is complete. She dismounts slowly. Her hair falls around her like a mantle. Her bare feet touch the earth, and in that moment she has done what no other noblewoman could have dared. She has turned shame into sacrifice, vulnerability into strength. When she enters again into the hall, Leofric waits. Perhaps his face is stern. Perhaps it is softened with awe. The chronicles do not tell us, but the legend insists that he is moved, that the sight of her courage bends his will more than any argument ever could. He keeps his word. The oppressive taxes are lifted. The burden upon Coventry is eased, and the people remember not only the relief of their poverty, but the vision of their lady who bore shame for their sake. For centuries the story will be told again and again. Each retelling will add its own colour. Her hair grows longer in the telling, her compassion deeper. the silence of the townsfolk more profound, but at its heart remains the same truth. A woman's courage transforming injustice into mercy. In Coventry, they will honour her in pageants and parades. Painters will set brush to canvas, showing her astride the horse, head bowed, hair flowing. Poets will write verses that turn her act into song. Historians will debate whether the ride happened at all, yet the legend will live regardless. For sometimes stories endure not because they are fact, but because they are true in spirit. That morning in Coventry, whether in flesh or only in memory, the sound of hooves became the sound of resistance. The fall of each hoof upon stone was the fall of injustice, and the silence of the people was louder than any shout. When night returns, Coventry sleeps easier. The barns hold more, the hearths burn brighter, and in the dreams of its people their lady rides again, not in shame but in triumph. The hall is quiet when she returns. The echoes of hooves are still fading from the streets. Smoke curls upward from the hearth as if the fire itself is exhaling. Leofric stands, hands clasped behind his back, a man measuring what he has seen against what he believed. Godiva's hair falls like a cloak, heavy with dew from the morning air. Her breath is steady, her eyes are calm. There is no triumph in her expression, only the gravity of a vow fulfilled. He opens his mouth as though to speak, then closes it again. Some moments cannot be met with words. He is a lord who has faced battle lines and witnessed men break under fear, but this quiet courage unsettles him in a way steel never has. At last he nods, the smallest of gestures, and yet it carries a kingdom's weight. The bargain stands, the taxes will be lifted. Messengers are called. Wax is warmed for seals. Parchment is unrolled across the table. Leofric dictates the orders, his voice even, his words precise. What was taken shall be eased. What was demanded shall be reduced. What was burdened shall be lightened. Outside, Coventry begins to breathe again. Shutters open with careful hands. People step into the streets as if waking from a strange dream. They do not ask what they were not meant to see. They ask only what has changed. Soon the news spreads. The weight is lifted. Mercy has come, and the town answers with a hush that feels like prayer. In the market, a woman lays aside the last trinket she was preparing to sell. In the smithy, a man straightens his back, as if a chain has fallen from his shoulders. At the gate, beggars murmur blessings, not daring to speak too loud for fear it will vanish like mist. Mercy, when it arrives, can feel as delicate as a bird's wing. Godiva walks the cloister that afternoon. The stones are cool beneath her feet. Monks move like shadows between pillars, their voices threading through the air. She listens without words, letting the echo of the chant wash through the chambers of her heart. Was there shame? Yes, there was the sensation of exposure, the chill of air on skin, the vulnerability like an unarmoured chest before a spear. But what remains afterward is not shame. What remains is stillness, a stillness that feels like a vow completed and returned to silence. Leofric joins her before evening. They stand together near a candle whose flame pulls small light on the stone. He speaks without ornament. The orders are sent. The burden is lifted. She closes her eyes for a heartbeat, and in that darkness she sees the faces of the town. Not as they were today, hidden behind shutters, but as they will be tomorrow, open in relief. "Thank you," she says, and it is not victory in her voice, but gratitude. There is no need to revisit the bargain, no need to polish the moment with argument. What is done is done. That night the hall is quieter than usual. Even the servants move softly, as if the day's story could be easily disturbed. In the kitchen, a pot steams and the smell of onions drifts like a gentle reminder that life, even after legend, returns to the art of simple meals. In the yard, horses stamp and settle, their breath turning to pale ghost clouds in the chill. Godiva retreats to her chamber and washes the dust from her feet. She combs through the tangles of her hair. Each stroke is a slow unwinding of the morning. She lays the comb aside and lifts her beads. Prayer can be wordless. Prayer can be the sound of breath and the rise and fall of a chest. If there is triumph, it belongs to the town. It belongs to the mother who will keep her hen for eggs instead of coin, to the child who will finish his bread and know there will be more tomorrow, to the old man whose last sack of grain will remain his. These are victories too small for charters, yet they are the kind that feed a soul. In years to come, tellers will polish the story. They will burnish her hair until it gleams like sunlight. They will make the streets more crowded, the silence more absolute, the single window that opened more dramatic in its disobedience. They will add the tailor's name, and add to it a punishment so swift it turns proverb. But today is not a proverb. Today is the day after a promise kept, and that kind of day is quiet. It is ledger books balanced. It is hands washed. It is bread shared a little more easily. Leofric sits late with clerks, arranging what must follow when a vow changes the coins of a town. He calculates where soldiers will still be paid, where roads will still be mended, where the monastery can be sustained. He is a man learning to build with mercy as well as with fear. It is slower work, but work nonetheless. In the weeks that follow, Coventry's sound changes. Markets murmur rather than groan. Laughter returns in thin threads, then in stronger chords. The baker's loaves are a bit larger, the ale a bit less watered. People carry their burdens differently when they feel seen. Godiva continues her rounds. She does not invite the town to speak of the ride. She asks instead about roofs and wells, about fields and fevers. Where she can, she gives. Where she cannot, she sits and listens. A listening ear is sometimes the only coin that buys hope. And yet the tale grows because people need stories as much as bread. They need a shape for gratitude, a frame for courage. They gather by hearths and in alehouses and say, "Our Lady rode for us. She felt our hunger and made herself hunger too." Whether the words are exact does not matter to a heart. What matters is the warmth they leave behind. In the monastery scriptorium, a young monk copies a psalm and pauses. He has heard the whispers. He does not write them. But when he shapes the word mercy, his quill moves with unusual care, as if by making the letters more beautiful he could set a small candle of thanks inside the page. There are places where the story does not land so gently. In other halls, lords laugh and say it never happened. In distant towns, traders retell it with smirks and indulgent winks. Even kindness can be mocked when it is misunderstood. But Coventry answers such laughter with the steadiness of those who know the taste of relief. Leofric does not speak of the day in public. He does not need to. His charters carry the new terms. His reeves enforce them. His silence becomes part of the story too, the way a mountain keeps its own counsel after a storm. For Godiva, life settles into a warmer rhythm. She rides again, now cloaked and hooded, through streets where shutters open to faces that no longer look away but look back with light in their eyes. Some bow, some simply nod. A few step forward to ask about a sick child or a broken fence, and she answers as best she can. There are nights when she wakes with the memory of cold stone beneath the horse's hooves. with the memory of air on skin and the ache in her throat from holding her breath too long. These memories are not wounds, they are cords that tie her to the people with knots that do not slip. Seasons turn, winter writes frost on the monastery windows, spring loosens the fields and paints them with the first green haze. Summer lays its warm hand on the town's shoulders. Autumn counts the grain, tallying hope in sheaves. With each circle of the year, the story settles deeper into the soil. Some day far ahead, chroniclers will argue. They will weigh parchment against rumour, charters against songs. Did she ride? Did she not? The question will stir ink for centuries, and yet, in Coventry, the answer will be simpler. She made mercy happen. After the ride, Godiva is not transformed into a creature of marble. She remains a woman who tires, who worries, who sometimes sits long at the window and watches swallows stitch evening to the eaves. But there is a subtle change in how her hands move. They move with a steadier confidence, as though a private earthquake has rearranged the furniture of her soul and left everything more securely placed. When pilgrims come to the monastery, they ask to see where she prayed. They kneel on the same stone. They whisper their own bargains with heaven, some for their children, some for their hunger, some for courage they suspect is sleeping inside them like a wintering seed. And Coventry, having learnt the sound a vow makes when it turns into law, begins to teach that sound to others. Messages ride outward with traders and minstrels. There is a town, they say, where mercy was measured in hoofbeats. There is a lady whose hair became a banner for the poor. There is a lord who once thought strength was iron, and now understands it can also be bread. The sun slips behind the western hedges. Shadows climb the walls of the hall. Godiva lights a candle and sets it near the window, a small lantern for the path below. It is not for spectacle. It is for the traveller who may arrive late and uncertain. It says in the language of light, there is welcome here. The day after the ride becomes the year after the ride, and the year after becomes a memory. Coventry wears like a quiet medal beneath its tunic, not flashy, not ostentatious, but close to the heart where it keeps courage warm. If history keeps arguing, legend keeps singing. If parchment keeps doubting, bread keeps rising. And between those two truths, Lady Godiva walks the cloister, passes the market, nods to the smith, and returns home by a road that no longer feels heavy beneath her steps. Legends travel farther than facts, but when we look closely, the woman behind the legend steps into view. She is not only the rider of stories, but a figure with power, land, and faith in her own right. Her true name in Old English was Godgifu. It meant God's gift. This name appears in the records of her time, not in poems or myths, but in charters and in the Domesday Book itself. Such records are not shaped by imagination. They are written to count what is owned, who holds it, and where authority lies, and in these records her name stands. The Domesday Book, compiled after the Norman Conquest, lists only one woman as a tenant-in-chief in England. That woman is Godiva. This means she held land directly, in her own right, not merely through her husband. It places her among the wealthiest and most powerful figures of her time. Few women ever achieved such standing. Her land stretched across the Midlands. Villages, farms, woods and meadows owed rent and allegiance to her. Her authority was more than symbolic. It was economic, social and spiritual. She was not only the wife of Leofric, Earl of Mercia, she was a great lady of England in her own right. She is remembered too for her piety. Together with Leofric, she endowed monasteries and churches. Coventry's first cathedral, a house of monks, owed its foundation to their gifts. Such acts were more than religious gestures. They bound faith and power together. They offered prayers for the soul's salvation, but also authority in the eyes of the people. One detail survives from her will. Among her possessions was a string of prayer beads. This is one of the earliest references in England to what would become the rosary. It is a small but telling glimpse into her faith and her daily devotions. It shows her as a woman not only of land and power, but of prayer. In her lifetime she lived through great upheaval. Born around the year 990, she saw the long reign of King Nut, the Danish conqueror who ruled England with a strong hand. She lived through the turbulent years of Edward the Confessor. She died sometime after 1066, the year William of Normandy crossed the Channel and changed England forever. She belonged to the last generation of Anglo-Saxon nobility. To understand the real Godiva, we must remember that noblewomen of her era were rarely mentioned by name at all. They moved behind the scenes, in households, in alliances, in whispered counsel. The fact that Godiva's name appears in documents across decades shows how unusual she was. She was not a shadow, she was a presence. Her marriage to Leofric was a bond of power as well as affection. Leofric commanded armies. He governed Mercia with stern authority. Yet again and again Godiva's name appears beside his in the gifts they granted. It is clear she was a partner in decisions, not simply an ornament to his hall. Charters list the estates they granted to religious houses. Wolvie, Binley, Unstey, other towns and villages too were marked as gifts for the sake of prayer and devotion. Each name is a stone in the foundation of Coventry's future. Each name carries with it the echo of Godiva's hand. Her wealth was extraordinary. In an age when even small patches of land meant survival, she held vast estates. Her tenants worked fields, bred livestock, wove cloth, and owed her rents. She was part of the small circle of people whose decisions could change the lives of thousands. The chronicles say little about her personality. They do not tell us her laugh, her gestures, the sound of her voice. Yet through her legacy we glimpse her character. A woman deeply pious, for whom prayer and generosity were inseparable. A woman independent enough to hold authority in her own right. A woman remembered not only in dry records but in the warmth of legend. The ride, whether true or not, fits into this larger picture. It may never have happened in the way later poets described, yet the memory of Godiva as a woman of compassion was strong enough to make the story believable. Legends cling only to those whose lives already hold seeds of truth. Even her name survived through centuries of retelling. Godgifu in Old English became Godiva in Norman French. Language shifted, spelling bent and twisted, but her story remained. Through parchment, through song, through brush and paint, she rode onward into history. The real Godiva was not merely a rider in a tale. She was a landowner, a patron of churches, a figure whose name survived the fall of kingdoms and the coming of conquerors. She was flesh and blood, prayer and power, faith and duty. And that is legend enough. When we peel back the poetry, we find her in the heart of history, a woman of her time, yet also beyond it. For even stripped of the tale of the ride, she remains extraordinary. In Coventry, the memory of her generosity did not fade. The monasteries she founded carried prayers for her soul long after she was gone. The land she granted continued to feed monks to aid the poor, to anchor the town in faith. Her presence lingered in every prayer said in those cloisters, and so when centuries later the legend of her ride was told, it was not told of a stranger. It was told of a woman already remembered as merciful. It was told of a woman already honoured as a benefactor. The myth grew upon the foundation of the real Godiva, Countess of Mercia. To remember her rightly is to remember both, the woman and the myth, the landowner and the rider, the gift of God and the gift of story. Together they form the tapestry that still hangs in the mind when we hear her name, Lady Godiva, God Gifu, God's gift. Legends do not grow in straight lines, they twist, bend, and borrow from older roots. The story of Lady Godiva's ride is no exception. Beneath its Christian surface, older echoes stir. When Robert Graves wrote The White Goddess in the 20th century, he suggested that Godiva was not only a historical woman, but a survival of ancient goddess imagery. Her nakedness, he argued, was not merely protest, but ritual. A ride unclothed through fields or towns echoed fertility rites, blessings for crops, ceremonies older than Christianity itself. In pagan tradition, the naked body was not always shameful. It was powerful. It symbolized life itself. It was linked with earth, harvest, and renewal. The goddess who appeared without covering was not humiliated but revered. Her body was the body of the land, and her exposure was a sign of blessing. Imagine the fields of Mercia long before Godiva's time, farmers praying to unseen forces for rain, women walking boundaries of fields with torches chanting for fertility. Nakedness here was not scandal but symbol, a way of showing nothing stood between the people and the powers they called upon. It is possible that such echoes whispered beneath the Godiva legend. Her ride through Coventry may have felt to later generations like the return of an old ritual, clothed now in Christian story. She became both the noblewoman of history and the goddess of memory. Christianity by the 11th century was the dominant faith in England. Monasteries rose across the land. Priests guided villages with sermon and sacrament. And yet the older ways did not vanish overnight. They lingered in folklore, in festivals, in the corners of fields where charms were buried with seed. The legend of a noblewoman riding unclothed could therefore be read in two ways. For the Christian mind, it was an act of humility, of sacrifice, of bearing shame for the sake of mercy. For the older imagination, it could carry the echo of ritual blessing, the goddess moving through her people to grant fertility and fortune. This tension between pagan root and Christian leaf gave the tale its lasting power. It could be retold in monasteries as an example of pious sacrifice. It could be retold in markets as a wonder, half sacred, half daring. Each listener could find in it what they needed. Consider also her name, God Gifu, God's gift. The name itself carried spiritual weight, whether read as a Christian dedication or as a whisper of divine embodiment. In her very identity, the border between sacred and earthly blurred. Medieval chroniclers were often uneasy with tales that carried too much sensuality, and yet they did not erase Godiva's story. They reshaped it. They emphasized her humility, her bowed head, her prayerful courage. Painters later showed her not as triumphant, but as solemn, almost saintly. Her nudity was softened into devotion, not desire. Still, the older symbols shine through. Her hair cascading down recalls the wildness of nature. Her horse is more than transport. It is the beast that connects woman and earth, a living force beneath her. Her silence as she rides recalls ritual processions, where words were forbidden and only gesture mattered. The story also touches on the ancient theme of the sacred bargain. The god or goddess demands a sacrifice, the mortal answers. In return, balance is restored. Here Leofric plays the part of the stern deity, demanding the unthinkable. Godiva plays the mortal who accepts, and through her acceptance the people are freed. It is myth shaped into history, history shaped into myth. As centuries passed, storytellers layered Christian morality over the tale. They saw in Godiva a Christ-like figure, bearing the shame of others to grant them relief. Her nakedness was no longer fertility but humility, no longer goddess but saint. This reframing allowed the legend to survive in a culture where pagan rites would have been condemned. Yet even in this Christian retelling, traces of the old ways remain. Festivals in Coventry celebrated her ride with parades and pageants. In these, the line between sacred devotion and folk revelry blurred again. Carnival laughter mixed with solemn prayer. The goddess and the saint walked side by side. This blending is why the legend endured. It could belong to everyone. To monks in cloisters, it was a story of penance and humility. To farmers in fields, it was a story of blessing and fertility. To nobles, it was a tale of loyalty and obedience. To common folk, it was proof that even the mighty could bend for their sake. The ride itself may never have happened, but the myth carried truths older than parchment. That mercy requires sacrifice, that vulnerability can be power, that women, though often silenced, could become voices for the people. These truths are why the tale outlived its century. In the quiet of a medieval church, monks might pray for Godiva's soul. In the noise of a market, minstrels might sing her name. In both places the story carried echoes: Christian devotion, pagan ritual, human compassion. The real woman, Countess Godiva, gave lands, endowed churches and ruled estates. The legendary woman, Lady Godiva, rode unclothed through Coventry. Between them lies a bridge built of myth and memory, where pagan earth meets Christian heaven. And in that bridge her figure endures, neither entirely goddess nor entirely saint, but something in between, an icon born of both worlds, claimed by both faiths, living in both hearts. Centuries pass after Godiva's lifetime, yet her story does not fade. It grows. It spreads from parchment to voice, from cloister to marketplace. By the later Middle Ages, Lady Godiva has become more than a countess. She has become a legend woven into the fabric of Coventry itself. Chroniclers of the 12th and 13th centuries begin to record the tale. They tell of a noblewoman who rode unclothed through the streets to free her people. Details vary. Some emphasize her hair as her covering. Some add the figure of the disobedient tailor Tom, who dares to peep and pays the price with blindness. Each version shapes her story anew. In a time when literacy is rare, it is oral tradition that carries weight. Minstrels sing of her ride in alehouses. Priests mention her sacrifice as a moral example. Merchants travelling to Coventry carry the tale outward, repeating it in towns far beyond Mercia. What was once a private vow between husband and wife becomes a tale told across England. The people of Coventry make the story their own. By the 13th century, pageants and processions begin to appear. In these public displays, a woman rides through the town as Godiva. It is not unclothed, but dressed in a flesh-coloured garment or veiled by hair. Still, the symbolism is clear. Her act of mercy is reenacted so that every generation may remember. Such processions become part of the town's identity. They celebrate not only Godiva's compassion, but Coventry's pride. The town is no longer simply a place of trade and worship. It is the town of Lady Godiva, the town of mercy and legend. Visitors come to see the pageants. and with them comes prosperity. The medieval world thrives on saints, miracles, and moral stories. Godiva's legend fits easily into this framework. She is not declared a saint, yet her tale carries saintly qualities. Self-sacrifice, compassion, miracle in the blinding of Tom. The line between history and hagiography blurs. Artists begin to take interest. Illuminated manuscripts sometimes depict her ride, a small figure upon a horse, hair falling like a curtain. Later, stained glass will catch her image, sunlight pouring through the story of her courage. Coventry churches carry her memory in whispers of decoration, in sermons given to townsfolk on feast days. The tale also spreads across Europe. In France and Germany, travellers repeat what they have heard. Foreign chroniclers include the story in their own collections of wonders. Thus Lady Godiva joins the company of figures half real, half legendary: Charlemagne, Arthur, Roland. Not myth alone, but not mere mortal either. For the people of Coventry, the pageants are more than spectacle. They are civic ritual. They bind the town together. To watch Godiva ride each year is to remember mercy, to remember community, to remember that rulers can bend for the people. Even if the real Godiva never rode, the memory of her as one who would has power enough. The story also teaches caution. Peeping Tom becomes a moral figure, a warning. To betray trust, to break reverence, is to invite punishment. His blindness is not only physical but symbolic. He represents those who cannot see the higher meaning of sacrifice, who look only with base desire and are struck blind by their own folly. Thus, Coventry carries both figures, Godiva and Tom, as shadows of one another. The merciful lady and the unworthy peeper, one elevated, one condemned. Together, they shape the legend into moral drama. By the 15th century, Coventry is thriving. Its cloth industry grows, its markets expand, and with prosperity comes pageantry. The Godiva procession becomes one of the centerpieces of the town's civic life, celebrated alongside mystery plays and guild festivals. Imagine the scene on a summer's day. The streets hung with banners, guild members marching in bright livery, actors performing scenes of biblical drama, and among them, the lady herself, veiled, solemn, riding through the crowd as a living echo of Godiva. The people cheer not for scandal but for pride. Their town is unique. Their town has a story unlike any other. In this way, legend becomes identity. Children grow up not only hearing the tale but seeing it embodied in ritual. Merchants sell tokens of Godiva. Visitors carry the story away, ensuring its survival. What might have been a forgotten anecdote becomes immortal through repetition. Yet even as the legend grows, the real Godiva is not forgotten. Monks continue to pray for her soul. Her charters remain in archives. Her donations to churches still shape the spiritual life of the town. The woman and the myth intertwine until they are inseparable. In the medieval imagination, time is not linear. The past lives beside the present. The Godiva who walked the cloisters is the same Godiva who rides each year in procession. The woman who granted land is the same figure whose hair falls like a veil in story. Fact and memory are braided like threads in a single cord. Thus the Middle Ages carry her forward. They do not ask too closely whether the ride truly occurred. They ask instead what the ride means, and in that question lies her immortality. When the bells of Coventry toll in the evening, their sound is not only prayer, it is also story. It tells of a lady who gave mercy. It warns of a man who looked wrongly. It binds a town to its legend as firmly as stone binds a cathedral to the earth. And so, through centuries of medieval memory, Lady Godiva rides on, not in the flesh, but in the imagination of a people, not on a single morning, but on every feast day, every pageant, every whispered telling. Her hooves echo across time, carrying her into the future where artists, poets, and reformers will claim her again. The centuries roll forward, and Coventry's pageants continue. But it is in the 19th century that Lady Godiva finds new life. The Victorians, with their fascination for history, morality, and sensuality disguised as art, take up her story and make it their own. This is the age of poetry. Alfred, Lord Tennyson, the great poet laureate of Queen Victoria's court, turns his pen to Godiva. In his poem, he shapes her into a figure of solemn courage. He describes her hair as a veil, her ride as an act of saintly humility. His words are read across parlours and classrooms, cementing her image in the minds of the English people. Painters, too, find in her legend a perfect subject. The pre-Raphaelites, with their love of medieval romance and symbolic beauty, bring her to canvas. John Collier paints her in 1897, head bowed, hair falling forward, her nudity softened by solemnity. She's not brazen but penitent, not sensual but sacred. Art allows the Victorians to look upon her unclothed form while claiming the mantle of morality. The paradox is striking. This was an era famed for modesty, skirts brushing the floor, collars high, manners restrained. And yet it was also an age obsessed with the female form in art. Godiva gave them both. She was purity and desire, humility and spectacle, a saint and a muse. In Coventry itself, the pageant flourishes. The Godiva procession becomes one of the largest civic celebrations of the era. Crowds gather to watch as a chosen woman, veiled or costumed, rides through the streets. The town's identity is bound ever tighter to its legendary lady. Tourists arrive by rail. They come not only for industry but for story. They buy trinkets, postcards, and printed pamphlets retelling her tale. Coventry sells its legend as much as its cloth, and Godiva becomes part of its economy as well as its memory. Writers and reformers seize on her image. The suffragists of the 19th century, fighting for women's right to vote, look to Godiva as a symbol of fearless exposure. Harriet Martineau, the political writer, urges women who fear ridicule to think of the Lady Godiva. Josephine Butler, campaigning against unjust laws that targeted women, writes a play called The New Godiva. In her words, the act of riding unclothed becomes a metaphor for stripping bare the soul in the service of justice. Thus, in Victorian hands, Godiva becomes more than a medieval tale. She becomes a rallying cry, a reminder that a woman's body, often used as a symbol of weakness, can be transformed into a symbol of resistance. The ride becomes political as much as poetic. Even Queen Victoria herself engages with the image. She gifts her husband, Prince Albert, a statuette of Godiva. It is a curious token, part art, part symbol, part acknowledgement that the legend has passed into the very bloodstream of the nation. What began as a local story in Coventry now stands in royal chambers. The Victorians also add layers of spectacle. The Godiva pageant is accompanied by guild banners, brass bands, and theatrical displays. No longer a solemn procession alone, it becomes carnival and civic pride, morality play and celebration rolled into one. Imagine the streets filled with colour, children waving flags, merchants selling ribbons, musicians striking up lively marches, and in the centre the rider herself, face solemn, hair loose, costume modest but suggestive, representing Lady Godiva for all to see. To Victorian artists she was muse, to reformers she was symbol, to Coventry she was heritage, and to the wider public she was fascination. Her story fit the contradictions of the age, moral yet sensual, modest yet bold, historic yet timeless. Tennyson's poem, Collier's painting, the public pageants, these ensured that when the world thought of Lady Godiva, they did not think only of medieval charters and monasteries. They thought of hair as veil, of sacrifice as beauty, of courage as art. In this way, the Victorians did not merely inherit the legend. They reinvented it, they polished it, painted it, paraded it, and claimed it as their own mirror. It reflected their values, their anxieties, their desires, and so it became part of their century as much as the 11th. But in reinventing her, they also gave her new life. Without the Victorians, perhaps Lady Godiva would have remained only a local Coventry tale. Because of them, she became a figure of national, even international recognition. From poetry to painting to politics, her ride spanned new worlds. Gaslights flickered on cobbled streets, as trains thundered across the countryside, as factories poured smoke into the sky. The image of a lone rider with cascading hair remained vivid. She was a reminder of sacrifice in an age of industry. She was a vision of beauty in an era of machines. She was both past and present, saint and spectacle. Thus, the 19th century left its mark on her as surely as she left hers on it. When the Victorians dreamed of medieval England, they dreamed through her. And when they dreamed of courage, they dreamed in her image. Lady Godiva rode once more, this time not through the streets of Coventry alone, but through the imaginations of millions. Every age reshapes Lady Godiva, and with each reshaping comes both reverence and critique. The same Victorians who celebrated her courage also lingered on her body. Art, while clothed in moral language, often carried an undertone of desire. Godiva became not only a saintly rider, but also a spectacle. This tension has never left her story. On one hand, she is remembered as a woman of compassion, willing to endure humiliation for her people. On the other, she is displayed as an unclothed figure for others to gaze upon. Between these poles, devotion and desire, respect and exploitation, her image has swung for centuries. Artists of the 19th century claim to paint her with solemn dignity, yet their canvases often emphasize soft flesh, flowing hair, and the vulnerable curve of her form. John Collier's famous painting, for instance, shows her bowed and sorrowful, but also bare in a way designed to draw the viewer's eye. Viewers could claim they were admiring morality while indulging in sensuality. This is the paradox of Godiva. She's a story of resistance, yet she's also a canvas for the male gaze. Feminist scholars later pointed out how she was transformed into a passive symbol of eroticism. Her choice, her courage, was often overshadowed by her nudity. Her protest was turned into pageantry. Pageants themselves sometimes leaned more toward entertainment than reverence. The Godiva procession, while born of civic pride, often attracted gossip. Who would be chosen to ride this year? How would she appear? Was the costume modest enough or daring enough? The very act of portraying Godiva carried with it scandal as well as honour. In newspapers of the 19th and early 20th centuries, reports of the procession were often accompanied by sly remarks. Writers described the grace of the rider or the beauty of her hair. The legend became at times an excuse to talk about women's bodies in a society that otherwise demanded modesty. Even earlier medieval pageants faced similar criticism. Some church leaders warned against excess, fearing that the reenactment reenactment of the ride could slip into indecency. What began as moral lesson risked becoming festival spectacle. The line was always thin. This duality has followed her into every age. In art, she can be an icon of sacrifice. In popular culture, she can be reduced to an erotic image. The woman who begged mercy for her people is often drowned beneath the image of flowing hair and exposed skin. And yet scandal does not erase meaning, it complicates it. For every painting that objectified her, there was a poem that praised her compassion. For every pageant whispered about in taverns, there was a reformer who invoked her as an emblem of courage. She has always carried both weights. In Coventry, the tension was felt most strongly. The city depended on the pageant for its pride and its economy. But it also had to guard against critics who accused it of indecency. The balance was delicate. To honour Godiva was to risk scandal, but to abandon her was to lose a part of Coventry's soul. By the 20th century, the problem deepened. Cinema and advertising discovered her image. Now, not only paintings and processions, but films and posters carried her form. Some treated her story with respect, others with little more than titillation. Chocolate companies adopted her name, associating indulgence with her body. The feminist movements of the 20th century looked at this with sharp eyes. Some saw in Godiva an ally, a woman who exposed herself in defiance of oppression. Others saw in her a symbol stolen, reshaped to serve men's fantasies rather than women's strength. The debate continues still. What is certain is that scandal ensured survival. Had the story been only modest, it might have faded into archives. But because it carried sensuality, it drew attention again and again. Desire kept it alive, even when respect waned. Thus, paradoxically, what threatened to diminish her also preserved her. And perhaps there is truth here too. Godiva herself knew the power of exposure. She understood that to ride unclothed would force her husband to listen, force the people to remember. She used the spectacle of her body as weapon, not ornament. If later ages twisted that weapon into ornament, they still echoed the power she first claimed. So in every painting, every pageant, every advertisement, the question lingers, is this image of Godiva one of reverence or one of exploitation? Is she being honoured for her courage or displayed for her form? Perhaps the answer is both. Perhaps it has always been both. What remains unchanged is the pull of her name. Coventry still whispers it with pride. Poets still echo it with solemnity. Artists still paint it with fascination. And even critics, in pointing out exploitation, keep her memory alive. Scandal and spectacle have not destroyed her. They have ensured she will never be forgotten. Thus, Lady Godiva rides again and again, not only through the streets of Coventry, but through the centuries themselves. Sometimes as saint, sometimes as muse, sometimes as spectacle, always as a figure who refuses to vanish no matter how she is reframed. The 20th century arrives, and with it, new ways of telling stories. Lady Godiva does not remain in parchment and paint alone. She steps onto stage and screen, into novels and comics, into songs and advertisements. Her legend is retold for a modern world. In 1955, Hollywood places her at the centre of a historical film. Lady Godiva of Coventry stars Maureen O'Hara, the Irish-American actress famed for her fiery presence. The film dresses Godiva in technicolor drama, a mixture of romance, politics and spectacle. Audiences see not only the ride, but also the imagined intrigues around it. This story becomes entertainment for a new age of cinema. Television too claims her. She appears in shows as varied as Charmed and Fantasy Island. Sometimes she's treated with reverence, sometimes with playful parody. Either way, her image remains instantly recognisable. A woman on horseback, hair cascading, courage and beauty entwined. Comic books reinvent her entirely. In DC Comics, a character named Godiva wields magical hair as her power. Her strands stretch and move at will, turning a medieval lady into a superhero. This playful reinvention shows how far her name has travelled, from prayer beads and charters to panels of illustrated fantasy. Music calls on her as well. Queen sings of her in Don't Stop Me Now, likening her speed to a racing car. Beyoncé, on her Renaissance album cover in 2022, poses astride a luminous horse, hair and body glowing with Godiva-like defiance. Each artist sees in her shorthand for fearless display, for confidence turned into art. And then, of course, there is chocolate. The Belgian chocolatier adopts her name and image, wrapping truffles and pralines in gold and branding them with her silhouette. The irony is rich. A woman once remembered for compassion toward the poor is turned into a symbol of indulgence for the wealthy. Yet even here, her legend proves enduring. When people unwrap a piece of Godiva chocolate, they unwrap a fragment of her story. In Coventry itself, her legacy continues in civic life. Since the late 20th century, the role of Lady Godiva has been held by Prue Peretta. For over 3 decades, she has embodied the figure in public festivals, processions, and community work. Through her, Godiva is not only myth but living tradition, a symbol woven into the modern identity of the city. The Godiva Festival, held annually in Coventry, draws crowds for music, art and civic pride. It is a modern echo of the medieval pageants, though now with stages, amplifiers and food stalls instead of guild banners. Still, at its heart it is the same, a town gathering beneath the name of the woman who once rode for its people. Tourists walk Coventry's streets and find her everywhere, on statues, clocks and murals. In Broadgate, a clock tower shows her figure, while a wooden Peeping Tom peers from a window. Shops sell souvenirs with her name. Guides lead tours that weave her legend with the stones of the cathedral ruins. Her presence is inescapable, as though Coventry itself breathes through her story. Feminist writers continue to debate her meaning. Is she a symbol of empowerment or of exploitation? Is she remembered for her courage or displayed for her nudity? The questions sharpen in modern times, yet they also show the depth of her influence. Few medieval women inspire such debate 1,000 years later. Some see in her a precursor to modern protest, a woman willing to expose herself, not in weakness but in defiance. Others critique the way she has been endlessly objectified, her agency lost beneath the fascination with her body. Both readings live side by side as they always have. Literature keeps reinventing her. In Judith Halberstam's novel Blue Sky Freedom, Godiva's name is given to a resistance leader in apartheid South Africa. The connection is deliberate. Godiva becomes not only an English legend but a global metaphor for courage against injustice. In Coventry, children grow up learning her tale as part of local pride. School plays, public art, even casual conversation return to her name. For them she is both history and fairy tale, a woman who once lived and a legend who never dies. Tourists may smile at the chocolate, the pageants, the murals, but for the people of Coventry her presence is deeper. She is the heartbeat of their story. When they speak of resilience, they speak of her. When they show their city to the world, they show her first. Modern Godiva is many things at once. She's a saint for some, a scandal for others, a brand for merchants, a banner for activists, a muse for artists. Few figures carry so many faces. Few legends survive by being both sacred and commercial, both solemn and playful. And so, in the neon light of concerts, in the glow of cinema, in the shimmer of chocolate wrappers, she rides again. Not only through Coventry, but through the imagination of a world that still hungers for stories of courage. She has crossed 1,000 years, and still her hooves sound on the stones of memory. To speak of Coventry is to speak of Godiva. The two are bound together like root and tree. Her legend is not only a tale told in passing, but the very foundation of the city's identity. Walk through Coventry today and you will see her everywhere. A statue in Broadgate shows her astride her horse, solemn and proud. The clock in the city centre marks the hour with her figure riding forth, while a wooden Peeping Tom peers from a high window. Shops and pubs bear her name. Even in the hum of modern traffic her presence lingers. For centuries Coventry has honoured her through ritual. The medieval pageants evolved into civic processions, and these in turn transformed into festivals. By the late 20th century, the Godiva Festival became one of the largest free family events in the United Kingdom. Music, theatre, art, and parades fill the city, yet at its heart lies the memory of the lady who rode for mercy. Local schools teach her story. Children learn not only of kings and battles, but of their own city's heroine. They march in parades dressed as monks, merchants, or peasants, recreating the medieval streets that once honoured her. For them, she is not distant history, but living heritage. Since the 1980s, the role of Lady Godiva in festivals has been embodied by Prue Porretta. Year after year, she appears in robes and crown, leading processions, visiting schools, and promoting charity. Through her, Godiva becomes flesh again, not unclothed but radiant, a symbol of community spirit. Generations have grown up seeing her ride not as scandal, but as celebration. The ruins of Coventry Cathedral also whisper her name. Bombed in the Second World War, the shattered walls stand as a monument to destruction and resilience. Beside them rises the new cathedral, a place of modern art and reconciliation. Visitors who come to see these ruins are often led also to the story of Godiva, for both tales, of mercy and of endurance, are the city's twin heartbeats. Walking tours guide visitors through streets where medieval foundations still hide beneath modern paving. They stop before statues and murals retelling the legend. Some guides emphasize the history, pointing to her lands and charters. Others lean into the myth, spinning the tale of the ride, the shutters, and Peeping Tom. Both strands are kept alive because in Coventry both are true in their own way. Public art continues to reinvent her. Murals on walls show her in modern style, sometimes traditional, sometimes abstract. Sculptors reimagine her posture. Painters reinterpret her gaze. The city commissions works that keep her image fresh, ensuring she is not trapped in the past but remains part of the living present. Even in commerce, her presence thrives. Local businesses proudly carry her name, linking their trade to the dignity of the legend. A bakery may shape Godiva buns. A theatre may host Godiva performances. A shop may line its shelves with souvenirs that carry her face. Tourism and pride walk hand in hand. And yet, for Coventry, she is more than marketing. She is memory. She is a story of mercy carved into stone and sung into song. When the people gather for festivals, they do not see only costumes and banners. They see themselves as heirs of a woman who placed compassion above pride. Every city needs a story to hold it together. For Coventry, That story is Lady Godiva. Through wars, through bombings, through modern reinvention, her name has been the thread. It has bound the city's identity in times of pride and in times of pain. Tourists may arrive to see art and history, but locals carry her deeper. For them, she is not only a noblewoman of the past, she is the guardian of their civic soul. Her image in bronze or mural is not only decoration but reminder. Compassion is strength, mercy is power. Peeping Tom, too, has found his place in the city's memory. Though condemned in the tale, his carved figure peers eternally from the Broadgate clock. He is the foil to Godiva's virtue, the shadow to her light. Children laugh at his wooden form, tourists take photos, but beneath the humour lies the moral. Respect is part of honour. Coventry wears Godiva like a mantle. Her story is its crest, its emblem, its song. From medieval parchment to Victorian painting, from modern festivals to chocolate wrappers, her image has carried the city's name around the world. Few towns can claim such a figure. Coventry can and does. At dusk, when the lights of Broadgate glow and the clock strikes the hour, her figure emerges once more. A small mechanical horse carries her across, head bowed, hair flowing, while Tom peers foolishly from his window. Crowds pause, cameras rise, and for a moment the medieval past and the modern present meet. It is a small ritual, but it ties the city to its legend as tightly as any festival. Thus, Coventry remains not only the city of spires and industry, but the city of Lady Godiva. Every stone whispers her name, every festival carries her image, every child learns her tale. She's not buried in history, but alive in the streets, alive in the air, alive in the soul of a city that claims her still. Lady Godiva's ride, whether real or legendary, is not only about one woman. It has become a mirror for all women who face exposure, ridicule or condemnation when they stand against injustice. Her story, retold across centuries, has inspired countless others to act with courage in the face of shame. In the 19th century, women fighting for rights often invoked her name. Harriet Martineau told her readers to think of the Lady Godiva when fear of judgment held them back. She reminded women that ridicule fades, but courage endures. Godiva's ride was not an act of vanity, but of sacrifice, and it showed that shame can be transformed into power. Josephine Butler, campaigning against the Contagious Diseases Acts, took the image further. These laws allowed police to seize women suspected of prostitution and subject them to invasive examinations, while men faced no such scrutiny. Butler called the laws cruel and unjust. In her 1888 play The New Godiva, she compared her own campaign to the legendary ride. She spoke of stripping bare the soul, enduring humiliation, and walking through the scorn of society for the sake of justice. For these reformers, Godiva was not merely a medieval lady on horseback. She was a banner, a reminder that women must sometimes bear exposure, endure gossip, and face ridicule in order to change the world. Her nudity became symbolic, not of weakness, but of truth revealed without disguise. The suffrage movement too drew on her image. Marchers carried banners of heroines from history, and Godiva's figure sometimes rode among them. She represented the willingness to challenge unjust authority, no matter the personal cost. When critics mocked women for stepping out of the domestic sphere, Godiva's story replied, "Better to be mocked and free than silent and oppressed." In the 20th century, feminist thinkers examined her tale more critically. Some praised her as an early symbol of resistance. Others warned that her image had too often been stolen by those who saw only her body, not her courage. The male gaze, as they called it, had turned an act of protest into an erotic spectacle. But even these critiques kept her name alive, sparking debates about how women's stories are told and who controls their meaning. The paradox is sharp. She is remembered because she rode unclothed, and yet that very nudity, meant as defiance, has too often been reinterpreted as spectacle. Still, within the paradox lies power, because every time the story is retold, women have the chance to reclaim it, to emphasize her courage rather than her form. Modern activists sometimes invoke her in new contexts. Artists stage performances of vulnerability, using their bodies to protest war, inequality, or environmental destruction. In each act, the echo of Godiva is present, the willingness to expose oneself in order to reveal the truth. Her ride remains a template for turning shame into resistance. Even popular culture reflects this dual meaning. When Beyoncé posed astride a glowing horse in 2022, critics noted the Godiva inspiration. It was not simply beauty on display, but power claimed. A woman showing herself without apology, gaze steady, refusing to be diminished. The spirit of Godiva gallops through such moments, bold and unapologetic. In Coventry, the living Godiva embodied by Pruparetta has carried the same message. Her role is not scandal but service. She appears at hospitals, schools and community events, always linking the ancient story to modern compassion. Through her, Godiva's legacy as a woman of mercy continues, reminding citizens that shame is not the end of a story, but the beginning of change. When women protest, they are often told to be quiet, to sit down, to cover themselves, to wait. But Godiva's story says otherwise. It says that sometimes the only way to be heard is to strip away fear, to walk or ride straight into judgment, and to trust that truth will endure longer than mockery. Her legend has survived because it speaks across time. To the medieval monk it spoke of humility. To the Victorian reformer it spoke of protest. To the modern feminist it speaks of reclamation. The core is always the same: courage that refuses to be silenced by shame. In every century, women have been told that exposure, whether of their bodies, their voices, or their beliefs, will destroy them. And in every century, some have answered with defiance. Lady Godiva rides among them, a figure who bore exposure and turned it into strength. She reminds us that shame is not an end, but a weapon to be broken. Thus her story belongs not only to Coventry, not only to England, but to all who face the threat of ridicule when they stand for justice. She is one of many women who refuse to be shamed, and through her countless others have found the courage to refuse as well. Every legend wears many masks. Lady Godiva is no exception. Across 1,000 years, she has been remembered as noblewoman, saint, goddess, protester, muse, and brand. Each age has shaped her into the figure it most desired or most needed. In her own time, she was Countess Godgifu, a landowner of wealth and authority. Her name was inscribed in charters, her gifts recorded in monastic books. She was real, tangible, powerful in a world that often left women unnamed. This is the first face of Godiva, the historical lady of Mercia, who prayed, endowed churches and ruled estates. In the early medieval centuries that followed, her story was reshaped into legend. She became the rider through Coventry, the woman who sacrificed pride to save her people. This is the second face of Godiva, the figure of mercy, the noble protester. Her courage was told in sermons and songs, a moral lesson wrapped in wonder. To pagans who still remembered older rites, she carried another meaning. Her nakedness recalled fertility, blessing, the goddess unveiled. This is the third face of Godiva, the echo of the divine feminine, the goddess in disguise. For them, her ride was ritual as much as resistance. By the Middle Ages, she was also bound to the morality of the church. Artists painted her as penitent, bowed and veiled by her hair. Chroniclers emphasized her humility, her shame endured for others. This is the fourth face of Godiva, the near saint, the Christian exemplar. Her ride became allegory, a mirror of Christ-like sacrifice. With the Renaissance and beyond, art grew bolder. Painters and poets leaned into her beauty. Her nudity became spectacle as much as symbol. This is the fifth face of Godiva, the muse. She inspired canvases, sculptures and verses that lingered more on her body than her defiance. The Victorians gave her yet another mask. Through Tennyson's poetry and Collier's painting, she became at once moral and sensual, a paradox for an age that prized modesty but hungered for beauty. This is the sixth face of Godiva, the angel of Victorian imagination, both saintly and alluring. She rode through parlours, galleries and festivals alike. For reformers, she was something more. Harriet Martineau, Josephine Butler and suffragists saw her as emblem of women's protest. Her nudity became not spectacle but metaphor for truth unveiled. This is the seventh face of Godiva, the activist's muse, the woman who refused silence. Her courage gave language to those who bore ridicule in pursuit of justice. In the 20th century, popular culture fractured her image further. To Hollywood, she was a heroine in Technicolor. To comic books, she was a superhero with magical hair. To musicians, she was shorthand for speed, beauty, and daring. This is the eighth face of Godiva, the pop icon, endlessly remixed, endlessly recognizable. Then came commerce. The Belgian chocolatier wrapped her in foil and gold. The name Godiva became synonymous not with protest but with indulgence. This is the ninth face of Godiva, the brand. A reminder that even legends can be commodified, their meaning sweetened and sold. And yet in Coventry, another face endures. The living Godiva, embodied by Pruporetta, rides in robes and crown, visiting schools, leading festivals and supporting charities. Here she is not scandal nor spectacle but civic spirit. This is the 10th face of Godiva, the community's heart, the lady who belongs not to history books but to her people. Thus she wears many faces at once. For scholars, she is subject of debate. For artists, she is muse. For feminists, she is battleground. For Coventry, she is heritage. For the world, she is symbol. Few legends survive such transformation. Arthur, Robin Hood, Joan of Arc, all are reshaped by each century. But Lady Godiva holds a special place, because her core is simple and strong, a woman who risked exposure for the sake of others. That truth can never be erased, no matter how many faces are painted upon it. She is at once history and myth, at once object and subject, at once woman and symbol, and it is this multiplicity that keeps her alive. A legend with only one face fades, a legend with many faces endures forever. So the many faces of Godiva ride together, the noble countess with her rosary, the goddess with her fertility rites, the penitent saint of Christian imagination, the muse of painters, the paradox of Victorians, the banner of suffragists, the icon of popular culture, the brand of sweet indulgence, the living lady of Coventry festivals, all are hers. And when we speak her name, we do not summon only one of these, we summon them all. We summon the history and the myth, the reverence and the scandal, the protest and the spectacle. Each face gleams for a moment before another takes its place, yet all belong to the same figure. Lady Godiva is not one story but many, not one meaning but countless, and it is in this shifting, this multiplicity, that she finds her immortality. Legends survive because they speak to struggles that never end. Lady Godiva's story is more than a tale of one woman and one ride. It is a reminder that mercy, compassion, and resistance to injustice are timeless acts. Her legacy is not confined to Coventry, or even to England. It belongs to every place and every age where people rise against oppression. The heart of the legend is resistance. A woman confronts her husband, the lord of the land. She pleads for the poor who cannot bear the weight of his taxes. When words fail, she chooses a daring act, one that shocks pride into mercy. Her ride becomes a protest, a demonstration that sacrifice can move power. In this, her story joins a long line of acts of resistance. Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat, Gandhi marching to the sea for salt, students standing with signs in the face of water cannons. Each act seems small, a single ride, a single seat, a single fist raised, but each act changes history. Godiva's ride was not a sword raised in battle. It was not an army marching across fields. It was vulnerability turned into strength, and that is why it still resonates, because so often the oppressed do not have armies. They have only their bodies, their courage, and their willingness to endure shame for the sake of justice. Her legend also carries the lesson that resistance does not always look like defiance alone. It can look like compassion. It can look like mercy. She rode not for herself but for others. Her humiliation was their liberation. That inversion of power is the core of her legacy. Modern protests often echo this. Activists chain themselves to trees, block roads, or march unclothed to draw attention to climate change, war, or inequality. They know that exposure shocks the eye. It forces the powerful to notice what they would rather ignore. In every one of these acts, the spirit of Godiva rides again. Her story also warns of the cost of resistance. The tale of Peeping Tom reminds us that not all will respect protest. Some will mock, some will exploit, some will turn an act of courage into scandal. Yet even so, the ride endures, the meaning survives, truth outlasts ridicule. In Coventry, her legacy became civic pride, but beyond Coventry, her name became metaphor. To be a Godiva meant to bear shame for a cause, to stand unclothed in defiance of injustice. Her legend leapt beyond the Midlands into the bloodstream of culture itself. Artists continue to seize her image because it speaks in many languages. To feminists, she is empowerment. To poets, she is sacrifice. To reformers, she is courage. To critics, she is caution. Each retelling reshapes her, but the core remains the same, a woman's body turned into a voice for justice. Even her contradictions are part of her power, because every protest faces contradiction. Every act of resistance is interpreted, twisted, celebrated, or condemned. Yet the act itself, once done, cannot be erased. Godiva rode. Whether in flesh or in memory, she rode. And no critic, no cynic, no mocker can take that away. Her legacy also teaches that resistance is not always loud. Sometimes it is silent. She rode through Coventry in utter quiet, head bowed, hair falling, hooves striking stone. No speeches, no banners, only presence, and that silence thundered louder than any army. In times of tyranny, silence can be complicity, but in moments of protest, silence can also be power. Godiva's silence was not submission, it was declaration. It said, "I will not cry out, I will not justify, I will only endure, and in my endurance you will be moved." That paradox continues to guide modern acts of civil disobedience. Sit-ins, silent marches, moments of stillness where bodies speak louder than words. Godiva's ride belongs to that tradition. Her protest was not violence but presence, not noise but resonance. And so, her legacy lives not only in art and story but in every act where the powerless find power in exposure, where compassion breaks cruelty, where silence carries thunder. Lady Godiva reminds us that resistance is not always about swords or speeches. Sometimes it is about courage that endures shame for the sake of mercy. In this way, she belongs not only to history, not only to Coventry, but to all who stand against injustice. Her ride is unfinished. It continues wherever a woman lifts her head against mockery, wherever a man lays down pride for compassion, wherever a people remember that mercy is stronger than power. The hooves that struck the stones of Coventry still echo. They echo in marches and parades, in protests and vigils, in every silent act of defiance. They echo across centuries, reminding us that resistance may be ridiculed, but it is never forgotten. Lady Godiva rides still, and through her the legacy of resistance rides with her.